Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining today. My name is Rebecca Andrade, and I'm the Educational Programs Manager here at the Kansas Health Institute. And I would like to welcome you to our fourth session of our Bring It Learning series, Learn How to Host a Hunger-Free Kansas Data Walk. The Bring It series is made up of 5 one-hour educational sessions about health policy topics related to issues that may be considered by the Kansas legislature this session. These sessions are an opportunity to bring your lunch, your questions, and perspectives to these important topics. KHI, or the Kansas Health Institute, is a nonprofit, nonpartisan educational organization based in Topeka. We were established in 1995 with a multi-year grant from the Kansas Health Foundation, and we are guided by the vision that Kansas will become the healthiest place to live through evidence-based and innovative strategies, policies, and practices. We work towards this vision by providing nonpartisan information, convening crucial conversations, and facilitating learning that leads to meaningful change. If you visit our website or you stop by our building, you'll see that our work involves research, evaluation, technical assistance, and policy analysis, as well as podcasts, blogs, and gatherings like today's event. And today's event will be facilitated by my 3 colleagues, Samaya, Victoria, and Avanti, and Samaya will kick it off by providing a framing for the session and introduce the data walk model. Over to you, Samaya.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca, and thank you all for coming today. We are so excited to share more about some practical tips and strategies for how you too can host a Hunger-Free Kansas Data Walk in your community. I'm Samaya Para-Kramer-Moore. I'm a senior analyst and portfolio strategist, and I will be joined presenting by Victoria and Avanti. Additionally, we want to thank our other colleagues at KHI who are deeply involved in this work. This webinar and overall our Hunger-Free Kansas Data Walk work would not be possible without their support. So we really appreciate and want to give recognition to their contributions. Next, I want to cover a little bit about what we will talk about today and what you should leave the webinar with. We're going to describe the data walk process, identify those ingredients for success for what you should have in place leading up to and at the day of your event. And additionally, we're going to provide you some practical strategies that you can then apply both to your planning and facilitation of the Hunger-Free Kansas Data Walk in your community. A little bit of a preview of what today's day is going to be. We're going to first start with the data walk model. I will cover that, then pass to Victoria, who will provide an overview of the 8 Hunger-Free Kansas Data Walk posters that you'll have available and a way to navigate those. Then I will cover some planning and hosting tips for what you should do to set up and host your Hunger-Free Kansas Data Walk. And then we'll pass to Avanti, who will facilitate a great panel. We're excited to be joined by the Executive Director of Hunger-Free Kansas, Erica DeBrick Kelly, and also our colleagues from the Kansas Health Foundation, Lindsay Wilkie. We do want to know from you, you have a lot of opportunities to spend your lunch elsewhere, but we're excited and honored that you're spending it with us. In the chat, if you would, we'd love to hear what brought you to today's session. So please respond. We'd love to hear why you chose to join this webinar, and we're excited to share the time with you. While you're doing that, I can start sharing a little bit about the data walk model and why we came to this work. So first, thinking about the data walk, we started our data walk work back in 2022, actually in Cowley County, working with Lindsay Wilkie when she was at Rise Cowley, as well as the Legacy, a regional community foundation, and USD 470. They hosted a really innovative event with funding from the Kansas Association of Community Foundations, Mott Foundation, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas Pathways Initiative, and the Kansas Health Foundation. For this data walk in 2022, KHI did the analysis and design for the posters, and it really sparked our work in thinking through how the data walk model can be scaled and brought to new topics and next steps. Following that data walk in Cowley County, it sparked additional data walks with them where they took the same posters and continued the conversation to many different follow-up events and engaging hundreds of partners locally in the community. So, as we start talking through the Hunger Free Kansas Data Walk model, we do have an amazing new tool that we want to share with you. The webinar will follow the framework of this tool, but if you do want to follow on along, please download it in the chat. To start off, step one is really about deciding if the Hunger Free Kansas Data Walk model is right for your community at this time. And I want to talk through data walks as a strategy that is really essential and surrounded by community storytelling. When we talk about why data walks and when it makes sense, we see some common settings or community conditions that are present, and that's community needs. So there's a health challenge. When we think about Hunger Free Kansas, is there a higher rate of food insecurity in your community? Where is that community need in your community that would navigate and bring people together to talk about hunger in your community? You might also see leaders motivated for change. They're willing to come together for a conversation and look for solutions. They may not agree on what the correct solution is or what the right next step is, but they're motivated to take action and move forward. And with that possible disagreements around the next step, it is a space where there's opportunity for some challenging conversations. With that, and this is something that we can talk through for facilitation, we see a willingness to learn together in the communities that have had the most successful data walks. There might be disagreements on what the right next approach is, but there's an interest in trying to understand and reach out together for next steps. When we talk about the data walk model as data walks as community storytelling, usually we are looking at community leaders at the center of this model. Who in the community can work together to really bring people together? Data walks start with that interaction with the data. Then we move into individual interpretation where the community members think through what does this data mean to me? And then in peers, with peers in their community, they'll talk through and share what they take away from the information and learn from each other. That peer-to-peer learning is really an essential piece of the data walk model, where you can share that community storytelling. Then a call to action is essential. We'll talk more about this. What is that next step people can take away from the data walks? And finally, an opportunity to try things new, experiment, see what works, try new things, collaborate in new ways, and then go back to the data points, see how you've made an impact over time. We have seen a couple different formats that data walks have taken. So when we talk about this, one format to consider is a data walk event. This is what we've seen, for example, with the first event in Cali County. Data walks are the center of the event. It might be a really big get together, bringing people and community leaders specifically to talk about the data and have conversations with other peer leaders. Next format to consider is you might have an upcoming event. This is a photo from Fuse, Kansas, an event hosted by Kansas Health Foundation, where the data walk was embedded into the event agenda. The event had a different purpose, but the data walk was used to help frame the conversation and bring people together. And then third, and data walk format to consider is community meetings. So a meeting in a classroom or an activity get together where you can use the data walk posters to interact with and build consensus and discussion before you move into your agenda for that day. One final question we get is whether or not displaying the posters alone is enough to be a data walk. This can still be very valuable, but it isn't necessarily a data walk. That peer-to-peer conversation and storytelling is essential to move this into that community storytelling model for a data walk. However, if you think you want to display the posters in the background of an event or in a community space, ask yourself what is your goal and whether or not displaying the posters alone will meet that goal. And with that, I want to pass to Victoria to share more about the posters.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria again, and I will be giving a brief overview of the Hunger Free Kansas Data Walk posters. Starting with a run through of the poster layout. Each poster is about 6 feet tall. We also have online versions you can access at the KHI webpage or linked to the Hunger Free Kansas reservation survey. And I believe we'll also place it in the chat. Starting at the top, each poster has the Hunger Free Kansas logo and a QR code that links to an accessible version of each poster. Every poster also has the specific measure and the definition that lets the audience know what they are looking at and how it fits into the broader topic. Next in blue, we have the key point and a short literature review that highlights the main findings from this poster. In the middle, we have the graphic display of data, which gives a greater context of the data. This looks different for each poster, whether it is a bar graph, a map, or a visual, as we see here. Finally, here we have the technical note and source. These are really important sections which answer the question about the data, where it came from, and how it was analyzed. And lastly, we have the acknowledgments, which recognizes the funding and support by the Kansas Health Foundation and the analysis and design by the Kansas Health Institute. There are 8 unique posters on different hunger-free topics, allowing different data and indicators. You may also hear us use the term set of 2 copies of each poster, or 16 total. We can recommend a number of posters based on your event size. For example, for a smaller event with 50 people or less, a half a set would be plenty. But if you have more than 200, you may need 2 sets. Next slide. In our current Hunger Free series, we have 8 unique posters on the following topics. Each poster highlights key data points composed of publicly available data on the state and county level. As an example, we will be looking at the key findings for our Food is Medicine poster and one of our ALICE posters. So looking at the Food is Medicine poster, this highlights the economic impact of chronic disease management among Medicare fee-for-service beneficiaries. Medicare spends more than $18,000 per year on average for each beneficiary with diabetes. Costs increase substantially when individuals have kidney disease, heart disease, or multiple chronic conditions. Food is Medicine programs offer promising strategies to manage nutrition-related chronic disease when integrated with clinical care. Studies show that interventions such as medically tailored meals are associated with reduced hospitalizations, improved health outcomes, and potential savings of thousands of dollars per patient. When integrated with clinical care, these nutrition-focused programs offer a promising approach for managing nutrition-related chronic diseases. This particular poster shows the percentage of households earning below the acid-limited income constraint, employed, or ALICE survival budget threshold. The ALICE household survival budget estimates the bare minimum costs of household essentials to live and work. ALICE families may work full-time, earning above the federal poverty line, yet struggle to earn enough to afford basic needs where they live. Our data shows that in 65 out of 105 counties, at least 4 in 5 households earn less than the survival budget. As we see in the darkest blue, on a state level overall, 39.2% of Kansas households are living below the survival budget. This is important because understanding financial barriers gives us a clear insight into the challenges families experience in accessing food and maintaining stable households. More information about each poster's methodology can be found in the technical notes in each poster. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. So Really, to think through the Hunger Free Kansas Data Walk, our first couple sections were about deciding if this is right for your community at this time. It might not be the right time, that might be in the future, or there might be another strategy that makes sense. So follow along with that step one to decide if this is the right fit for you right now. Once you have done that, and if you think you're interested, that first step, that next step is on planning. So when we think about initial visioning, you might first consider, and I saw a question in the chat about whether or not, how to know whether or not the data walk is going to be offered in your community already. That's a great question. If you're interested, look and talk to some of your partners in the community who might be championing this work. Or another option is for you to take this on. See if this is something you want to bring to your community. And the first process in that is seeing how it fits into your initial vision. What would be the goal, your goal for bringing this to your community? What would success look like after a data walk in your community? Is it generating conversation or new collaboration? Helping create a consensus around what is the state of hunger in your community. Those are all potential goals and could be measures of success. We also want you to start thinking through your audience. Who is the audience that you want for your data walk? Oftentimes, when we talked about initially, community leaders are at the center of this. But that doesn't necessarily mean elected leaders or those who hold the authority of their position. It could be community champions who have a lot of relationship and trust built up in the community. But most importantly, we want you to think through a diverse group of stakeholders who might work in the community in different ways and lead segments from their positions and status in the community. We also want you to consider the format. So we covered 3 potential formats that might be a great option for you. But start thinking through that. And then also, data walk planning is not something you do alone. Who is going to be in your corner helping you build this out? And that's who you should be starting to think through on what people, organizations do you need on your planning team to put together a successful data walk. Once you've done that initial visioning and you're interested, you feel like it's a good step for you, we want you to move to step 3 in the workbook. That step is where you really develop that planning team. You reach out to people who you think you want to help co-host and champion this together. Consider who has in your community the strongest connections, relationship, and trust with your intended audience of community leaders. And as you build that up, continually ask, who are you missing? Where are there potential perspectives or opportunities to further embed additional people into your planning team? We do recommend keeping the planning team still a little bit on the smaller side, probably no more than 5 people. However, we want you to be thinking through who are those that you need in order to organize a successful event and move it into the next step. That said, once you do your plan, you have your planning team together, we want you to go back to visioning. So remember, when you do this initial visioning, it's not the final approach. It just gives you enough of a context to be reaching out to your planning team. Then as a group, we want you to go back and revisit, refine those goals, what you want success to look like, who your audience is, and how you'll bring this data walk together. After you've determined that, you'll really go into logistics planning. How can you create a space and the environment that you need in order to bring people together for conversation and action following these data walks? Consider the invitation list, where to host it. Is there a neutral location or a community space? It might also make sense to incorporate it into an existing event. What times of day and week will you be able to reach your audience best? And how will you reserve those posters? We also want you to be thinking through who are you going to invite and how will you invite them? More about these details is available in step 5 of the toolkit. Once you have some of that initial logistics planning, please, please, please do submit a request to reserve the posters. Remember, set a request out and your date out far enough so you can finish your planning. And remember that this planning process does take time. By visiting this QR code in the website, you can look at the data, the posters that Victoria was showing, and also submit a request for your own Hunger Free Kansas Data Walk. We also want to share a couple tips from Hunger Free Kansas on what to expect when reserving those posters. First off, these posters are free to reserve. So you can reserve all 8 posters to bring to your community for free. The max rental is up to 30 days, though it is subject to demand. So you will work with Hunger Free Kansas to determine the right set, amount of time, and reservation. While the posters are quite tall, they do fit up cleanly in a carrying case, and they do fit nicely in the back seat of a car. Pickup locations are available in both Topeka and Wichita. And if you need any support navigating the reservation, you can reach out to the connect@hungerfreekansas.org email. Once you've done your planning process, you've reserved your posters, you have them, it is the day of your event. We wanted to share a couple more tips for what to have in place day of. There are a couple ingredients that are helpful for you. We recommend numbering the poster stations. You can arrange the posters in the room to best fit your event and the space you're in, but we do recommend starting with a numbered station and then assigning your attendees to a group. Group assignment allows you to select in groups that have diverse perspectives and who might not regularly partner with each other. This allows more opportunities for that peer-to-peer sharing and experiencing different perceptions of what the data looks like in the community that you're working in. It's also very important to have a facilitator day of who's providing instructions for how people move poster to poster. They also are that, if we're thinking about cooking, that lead chef, they're the ones setting the tone for the day and some ground rules. We want people to explore new perceptions, new ideas when they're navigating through this data. It's not an opportunity to think through exactly what the next step is. We want them to be thinking about why, and then using that as a jumping off point to understand and explore next steps. At the posters, we recommend leaving enough time so they can spend 5 to 8 minutes at each poster, talking through those core questions of what surprises you about this data and what do you want to learn more about. And then finally, before they leave, it's important for you to have a reflection or an action step. What can people do as a result of the data walk to stay involved or take a next step? A couple more tips before we get into our panel. We do want you to be considering how can you create space for interpretation. It's important to know that in data walks, you'll see people have different takeaways from the key finding. You're looking at the same information, but everyone contextualizes that with their own experiences. So make space for that. There's a reason we ask what surprises you about this data. With that in mind, your groups that you set is really important. So when you're setting groups based on the invitation list, try to form diverse groups with diverse perspectives so that there can be more sharing and exploration of new perspectives. We also want you to create opportunities to tell community stories together. So this can look like the facilitator adding in some of the community context. We also want you to have space at the event for sharing what this looks like in the work that you do or the work of your partners. There's ways to do this creatively through art or videos, but find some way to really embed that community story during, before, and after the events. With that in mind, we've talked a little bit about people having different perceptions of the data. We want you to lean into those uncomfortable conversations or disagreements on what the next step is It's really important to approach that with curiosity. We want you to be working as groups and with your peer leaders in the community to explore why they feel that way. What are those next steps? And really focus on building that consensus. And the data walks, that's peer-to-peer storytelling, is one way to do this. And then finally, that next step, what do you offer people as an action step following the event is really important. And note that people attending data walks can and should be exploring many different avenues. So provide that opportunity for trying something new, seeing different experimentation, new strategies, or new opportunities that haven't been tried before. And with that, I'm excited to pass to my colleague, Avanti, to introduce the panel.
Great. Thank you, Samaya. And hi, everyone. My name is Avanti Charathi, and I'm an analyst here at Kansas Health Institute. As Samaya mentioned, I will be facilitating our panel today. We have a great conversation in store for you. Each of our panelists will be providing a unique perspective and recommendations on running hunger-free Kansas data walks. So our first panelist is Erica DeBrick Kelly, who is the Executive Director of Hunger Free Kansas. She is leading the initiative to make the Hunger Free Kansas Data Walks a free resource across Kansas. So Erica is the main reason that we are here today. Next, we have Lindsay Wilkie, the Associate Director of Network Mobilization at the Kansas Health Foundation. Previously, she was a coordinator for Rise Cali and led one of the first data walks in Cali County, as mentioned earlier in our presentation. And then finally, our last panelist will be our presenter, Samaya Parkramer Moore. She leads KHI Data Walk work and will be providing some perspective on planning a data walk. So we'll start with the first question. I'm going to direct it towards Erica. So it's exciting that Hunger Free Kansas made these data walk posters available for free reservation across the state. What are you most excited about for Hunger Free Kansas data walks?
Well, thank you again so much to the entire KHI team and to KHF as well. Delighted to be here today and really appreciate everyone joining and taking taking time out of their busy schedules. But I think what I am most excited about when it comes to the data walks, and I saw some comments in the chat, a lot of fans of data joining us, and so that resonates with me. But I think I'm so excited to be able to make the issue of hunger more visible in our communities and across our state. Data can sometimes feel a little abstract, or how does it relate to, again, our organizations, our community, our state. But when you see it displayed, when we're talking about it with others, it really can help connect us again to our communities, and it can become more real. And so, I get excited when we can gather in a data walk and folks are talking about, yeah, I've seen this in my school. This matches what we're experiencing in our pantry, or I'm currently struggling in the same way and worrying about paying for my bills, or whether or not I can afford groceries. So that's something that I think is so important, because when we have those conversations, and I often say some of the most powerful ways to generate advocacy and to move towards change is when you're pairing both data with stories and lived experience. And so that's something that I talk about a lot, and I'm sure folks here are also in agreement with. And it's really, I think those are is kind of the magic behind the data walk. And I guess like the bottom line around this being made available and trying to have it again accessible to anyone across the state. And if picking things up in Wichita or Topeka is a barrier to you, by all means, let us know and we can figure out how we can support you in that regard. But I think I want folks to be able to walk away with, strengthened collaboration and coordination in their community. I think building that knowledge and common understanding is really important in our advocacy work and trying to ensure that every Kansan has access to nutritious food and affordable food. I hope that it sparks new collaborations and just overall partnerships and relationships. So I think those are some of the ways that I'm most excited about this resource and to everyone who's joining us today.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think you made a good point about having these data walks to connect data to the community. So, Lindsay, thinking about how you first hosted one of those first data walks in the state, can you tell us a little bit more about the Cali County Data Walk and why you saw the need to have these conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm at Kansas Health Foundation now, but as Samaya and you have mentioned, prior to that, I live in Cali County, rural area, about a population of 34,000 folks. And I was managing some grants. Many of you may have similar grants in your community. So the Blue Cross Blue Shield Pathways to a Healthy Kansas was a big part of my work. I did a lot with the community health needs assessment and implementation plan. So we have a critical access hospital and we have a rural health, emergency health hospital. We've got an FQHC, so I was right in the mix of all that. We had some funding to work on our early childhood efforts and early literacy across the state, which I know is a big push for lots of people thinking about childcare. And so I was sitting kind of at the intersection of all these sort of grant programs impacting kids in our county. And when we would go outside of the traditional partnerships, so like the people already playing in the spaces, the people already aware of the grants and funding, when we go outside and try to get other people involved, we were just running into just sort of some old narratives. So maybe it was people who'd had kids go through our school system and it had been 30 years since they'd been through the system, or maybe it had been 40 years since they'd needed childcare. And so they weren't aware of things like for every one child, one slot open for a 0 to 3 childcare spot in our county, there were 30 to 40 kids on a waiting list. They were not aware that the demographics in our county, primarily kids in poverty, 3/4 of them were coming from single parent homes. So a lot of the programs they were saying people should just take part in were really difficult for these families. Really, the demographics in our county were changing quite a bit. And so my colleagues and I at the community foundation, excuse me, Legacy Community Foundation, it's a regional community foundation, we're saying, gosh, how could we make people aware of some of this data in an environment that feels safe and open to have conversations and explore multiple interpretations? How could we do that and do it with a lot of people at once? And so we had this crazy idea, and I'm happy to talk about a few of the things that really made it work. I would say one thing that was essential was finding a trusted community partner. And I know Samaya was already hitting on that. For us in our area, that was the community foundation. They often sat at the center of lots of different things that people wanted, right? So a private sector, nonprofit, our local government, they were in all the meetings there. And so they were trusted by lots of different sectors in our community. And they were pretty neutral and unbiased as well. We also had to spend a ton of time. It was also mentioned a very diverse guest list, right? So trying to get lots of unusual voices. We had to spend a ton of time on relational capital. So we knew we would get our nonprofit friends to the table. We knew we'd get the people that cared already about this data, but we knew we wouldn't have great conversations in our community unless we went out and tried to get some unusual voices. And that honestly was one of the biggest learnings for me, was just the amount of time and relational capital we were going to need to spend to go get those unusual voices. And then the third thing that I think is really important was the fact that we had local data. So, and that could look different. I saw some of you on the guest list, you're statewide entities. So this could mean something different to you. But if you're looking at some of the Hunger Free Kansas data and it's statewide, what could you also do to think about the local data that supplements that conversation? So those were just some initial thoughts from our community down here in Cali County.
Thank you, Lindsay. I think all three of those points are really great points in getting those data walks started. And thinking about the data that goes on these posters, Samaya, could you expand a little bit on the process that goes into developing these posters and choosing data that can help support that community storytelling piece that both Erica and Lindsay brought up?
Yeah, I'd love to talk to that. And a little bit of context, how we've approached data walks has evolved over time. As we were doing data walks, we were having a post-event survey to evaluate the experience of the data walk each time. And that has led to some refinements and additional accessibility features about what goes on the posters. You'll notice, and Victoria ran through, one example is the QR codes at the top. This is an accessibility feature added based on those evaluations about how can we make this data available even to those who might have some visual challenges in reading the data on the day of. So we've continued to do evaluations of each data walk, and we're at a really exciting moment with this. So there are opportunities to continue to evaluate as we've refined in this new model where you're reserving each one. We're really excited to hear as more people reserve the posters, how that's going and what are opportunities to better understand the long-term impacts of the data walks. As we get into that process refinement, we have still kept a couple things the same, and that is we always start with publicly available secondary data. So with this, we know we work to identify some different indicator options that go onto the posters that can help connect people in the group to conversations about what this looks like in their community. That said, we know that data isn't available everywhere. I saw the question from Vanessa in chat about how do you handle that conversation around access. What we want to do and what we embed into the data walk is that community storytelling. So when there is county level data, we do include it. There's actually 2 posters for this set that have county level data. So we encourage you to look there to find your own county. And we want to make sure that you go into these conversations knowing that new things will come up. We know at a local level, secondary data doesn't capture everything. That is why this peer-to-peer conversation is essential. The community story, what you bring into the conversation with your peers, is essential to understanding what the data looks like in your community. It might sound counterintuitive, but one of my favorite things to hear at the data walks is someone very confidently saying, "This data is wrong." And that can cause some panic, right? But I will assure you that we've put a lot of effort into doing quality assurance and have a lot of confidence in the data and how it's presented. And we know there's limitations to secondary data. So it might not capture everyone's response or show every context in the community. But what that response, "this data is wrong," shows me and provides is that there's an opportunity for a paradigm shift. There's an opportunity where the data is coming up directly against someone's understanding of the world around them in their community context. And that is so powerful because it's an opportunity for peers in our community to share how they are seeing the data, what their experience working with community members is, and really thinking about, to Lindsay's point, who you have in that room makes it possible to have those conversations around, well, I'm curious why you see it that way. Why do you see it that way? Here's what I'm experiencing in my day-to-day life, or here's what I'm seeing as a social worker in my community, to really move into those next steps in shared understanding. With that in mind, it's so important to lead with curiosity so you can keep the conversation and momentum moving.
Thank you, Samaya. And both you and Lindsay have mentioned this theme of getting the right people into the room, getting different voices in the room. And Lindsay, you had talked about having to do that effort to build that relational capital to get the right people in the room. So I guess, can you talk a little bit more, and this is a question for all 3 of you, on how do you get those right people into the room? What is the process of getting the right people into the room to have those meaningful conversations that can lead to action?
I guess I can start, and then you says for all 3 of us, so we can kick it off. I won't spend too much more time here. I just think we had to put in the legwork down in Cali County. One of the things you may get as you're hosting this, probably our most common question was, what is a data walk? Like, do you literally walk? And so, like, people didn't have, KHI is doing a great job, Hunger Free Kansas doing a great job of getting the word out there. More people are starting to become familiar with this, but lots of folks just didn't know what it was. And so they saw this event on their radar and thought, like, where does this stack up in the importance? So we just had to go do the legwork, shake hands, explain what it was, and really inform people why we very much needed their voice, their perspective in the conversation.
Yeah, I can jump in, and then Samaya would love to kind of know your thoughts. In Lindsay, having, feel free to jump in if there are other points to underscore. But because I haven't hosted one of these myself, actually, certainly encouraging folks to do so and have experienced them. But I think it's really critical to think about the various sectors within your community or county or region, and or network broadly, and making sure that those sectors, those individual voices are really well represented. I think Samaya touched on that in her earlier overview, but making sure we're considering who from an education sector, our faith-based community, healthcare, our agriculture community, just really advocacy organizations, local coalitions. And I think that's what really strengthens the data walk, is the diversity of participants.
I definitely agree. And I also saw a question in the chat around how do you engage with those partners, and really thinking through there's an opportunity certainly at the event for engagement, but is there also an opportunity to bring some people who typically aren't in these conversations into your planning team to really, if you've noticed that there's conversations or voices that aren't being elevated to those community leaders and decision makers, how can you bring them into the conversation, bring them to the table to help shape the next steps? And there's so many different ways you can do that. But if you seek out opportunities to have a really great planning team who has connections and relationships with different groups within your community, you can use the data walks as a way to build that connection and relationships.
And I think I'll just add to the letting folks know that this is a really, this is a low lift, in terms of their time, and that it's an open invitation to truly learn and have a conversation. And I think when it's that kind of in inviting type of event, folks may be curious. And I love what you said, Samaya, about leading with curiosity, and consider, who else are your, whether from your planning team or, board members or other leaders who can be an ambassador for you and making that ask. If you yourself are not comfortable or may not know who to reach out to. But I also just encourage, the cold calls and the opportunity to meet new folks. One of my first jobs that I ever that led to a career in anti-hunger work was me simply reaching out to an organization saying, I love what you do, and let me know if there's ever an opportunity to help. And from there generated a job opportunity and 14 years of service. But so I just really encourage even if you don't have a relationship from the start, it's totally worth the ask.
Not to drag this question on, but the questions in the chat actually helped me refine my answer, and I was going to add just two more things. One was about just, I guess I keep using the phrase unusual voices, and that I thought this applied here. Kind of what I'm meaning there are the folks beyond who typically think about and work on hunger. And I had a pretty good example it was on childcare in our area. But because of the data walk, we had two champions really emerge. One was a Rotarian guy, older. No, his grandkids were well beyond the age, and he became the big, but he used to be in real estate. And so he became a massive champion in our area for trying to find a place for a new child care center and doing childcare walks through with us, this, older gentleman. And it was just so fun. And so, had we not had the data walk to initially grab his interest, I don't think we would have had him become one of the biggest champions in the work and who really solidified some of our moves in it. And then I also saw the question about translation, and I think KHI can address that with the posters. I will say at our data walk, so in Cali County, we have a large Latino population, at least a fifth and growing, and so a fifth of our population. So we did make sure at our data walk to have at least two folks in the room in various groups who actually they were trilingual and could help with some of that, but definitely work we could have done to do that even better.
And then Erica, I saw you came off mute. I just wanted to see if you had anything else to add to that. Otherwise, I think there's a couple questions in the chat I can pass to the
Yeah.
team.
I know, and Samaya, feel free to jump in as well. I know that we have considered and certainly want to make these resources available in other languages, and I believe that's being considered. But yeah, feel free to jump in, Samaya, if you have more to add on that point.
Yeah, definitely. And it's an exciting opportunity. So we're looking forward to working with you more on that, Erica.
All right, yeah, we have a couple questions in the chat, so I'll ask those and then we'll wrap up. One question was about actually running the data walk. Would you suggest having someone stand at each poster to answer questions or allow people to draw their own conclusions?
Take that one because we have tried both. So we've learned a lot from the data walks over time. What we have found is if you have someone standing at the poster, people generally wait for them to tell them how to interpret it. And what we really want in the data walks is that community storytelling, the peer-to-peer sharing. So when you have someone standing at the poster, we lose some of that. What I encourage instead is a hidden facilitator, someone in the group who is assigned to help bring the group back to those core questions about what surprises you or what do you want to learn more about, and kind of keep them moving to each poster, but is not representing themselves as the expert of the content and what's on the poster. We've very specifically designed these to have everything that's needed for interpretation on the poster, but certainly are available via email if there's any questions that come up.
Thanks, Maya. And then one final question. Has anyone used the data walk with a Chamber of Commerce event to engage with some diverse business members that may not go to other health events?
I'm thinking in my mind, I don't know specifically about the Chamber of Commerce. The Wichita Business Journal did do a data walk, and Samaya, was that you all that did the posters for that? I thought, yep. I would say I attended it. I didn't host it, but I attended it, and it had some of the most diverse sort of folks that I'd seen at one of the data walks before. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
It definitely has varied by community, but if you have a local business who is interested in being a champion of this work, or the Chamber of Commerce comes together as a co-sponsor, bringing people to the table, that makes your event even stronger. So thinking about who can be supportive of bringing people together through that role on your planning team can really make your event thrive. And we do encourage, when you're thinking about data walks at different events, there might even be an opportunity, even if they don't host it, to have a data walk at a meeting for the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, I love all of those ideas, and whoever threw out that question, I'm happy to look through the submissions that we have received already to touch base if there was a partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. But I think it's a fantastic idea, and run forth, like, and let us know how we can support you.
All right, thank you everyone for your questions. It really helped us build out this panel even more. I just want to wrap up and thinking about that call to action piece that we talked about with data walks. So, last question for you, Erica. When you're thinking about achieving a hunger-free Kansas, what are calls to action that you hope to see at these data walks?
Yeah. Well, I could probably go on for the remainder of our time, but I will allow folks to have a few minutes before their next obligation. And but I think, when we think about achieving a hunger-free Kansas, it's big, it's aspirational in a lot of ways, or it feels like it can be a big long-term vision. And I think what most excites me, again, going back to your first question, is that the issue solving for hunger is in fact solvable. We do have those solutions, and especially here in Kansas, when it comes to the infrastructure that we have from our nonprofit community, our business community, our agriculture community. We're a very generous state. Having worked across the country, we give with our time, our talents, our resources, and that is a real asset that our state has. And so I truly believe that we can end hunger, and that the problems aren't so insurmountable that we can't solve for that. But of course, there's always going to be a need, that we will have individuals who are struggling with hunger in all of our communities. And so it's about making sure that we put in place, those systems, those programs, those partnerships that can make nutritious food accessible and affordable for all Kansans. So when we come about like calls to action, I'd really encourage folks to look at the workbook, to look at the tips that Samaya highlighted. I think that I want folks to be able to walk away with what can we do next? What can we do together? Kind of asking those types of questions, realizing that everyone has a role to play. And again, when you're thinking about big problems, they can become, we can get in a place of inaction. And so it's okay to start with a small goal. So I think for local, leaders and organizations, how do we use this data again to align the partnerships, the programs, the policies, so we're not working in silos and really working across organizations. I think for community members, I hope that they are encouraged to speak up, to share their lived experiences, to help shape what those solutions look like, and really work for a local community. I think for policymakers, it's how can data walks really, how can they let the data guide where those investments should be made? The proven strategies like school meals, making sure that we do have SNAP access, local food infrastructure, so that we can really drive measurable impact. And so I think those are some key ways and takeaways. So I guess like rounding out calls to action, keep the conversation going, making sure that we're continuing to pair this data and utilizing KHI as a trusted resource, going back to them time and time again, paired with that lived experience. I think identify one concrete next step is a really, really key way to keep the momentum going. I think often we plan, events or just conferences and things, and you're so focused on that actual experience. I really wanted to underscore what Samaya said, thinking about the what's next and doing some of that in the forward planning. So, and of course, stay connected to Hunger Free Kansas. We want to help support you, all of the great work that you're doing. So I'll close it up there and turn back to you, Avanti.
Thank you, Erica. And thank you, Erica, Lindsay, and Samaya for the great conversation today. I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca to wrap us up for our webinar today.
Thank you so much. Awesome. Well, thank you, Samaya, Victoria, and Avanti for facilitating and presenting today's session. And thank you, Eric and Lindsay, for joining us to share your insights and expertise. And a big thank you to all of our audience members as well. We really appreciate all of your great questions and thoughtful insights that you're sharing in the chat to continue this conversation and really keep the movement going. And so on the screen, you will see a QR code and a link for a feedback survey. We would really love and encourage for you all to share your thoughts in that survey. Let us know what you thought about today's event and help us plan and design for future events that will really meet your needs and address the questions and interests that you have in the work that you're doing. So you'll find the link for the feedback survey in the chat. And I'm just going to share a few more pieces of information. Once again, I want to mention the workbook and redrop that PDF into the chat. And so you'll be able to click on that PDF. It'll save right to your device. This will also be available in about a week on our website as a part of on-demand materials. So you'll be able to access it via a link and share it with anybody who you think might be interested. And also wanted to encourage you to visit our website, khi.org, to explore and see other resources and events that we have that might be related to your work. Thank you again for joining us today. It was a pleasure to spend this lunch hour with you, and we hope to see you next Tuesday. Thank you.